You know, for some people, inspiration strikes and boom, the Sistine Chapel gets one of the most beautiful paintings to ever exist. And yet here I am, fun idea popping into my head, and suddenly I'm in the monster factory, making a woman who looks kinda like a snake. Really putting that art degree of mine to use, huh? Except, my degree's in creative writing, not visual media. Well, howdy, and welcome to DevBox. I'm Prakuza, and today I wanted to ask the question, can you beat Dark Souls as a snake lady? You know, like the ones in Sen's Fortress. Alright, before we get started, the answer to the question is yes. I'm about to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get a weapon that deals damage, along with a spell that does more damage. We good? Alright, good. Now, fail to do the Asylum Demon skip, get our Estus Flask from Oscar, and we can start the run proper once we get out of the Undead Asylum. So, in Lordran, we need to go on a bit of a collect-a-thon, because in order to get our weapon of choice for this run, we're going to need two weapons, actually. The first is a talisman, which can be found in one of the chests under the elevators in Firelink that lead up to Undead Parish. The second is the Flambergi? Hold on, let's see how this is pronounced. Seems like there isn't a singular pronunciation for the weapon, actually, since the term used for it, essentially translating to flame-bladed sword, appears in German as Flammenschwert, along with other spellings and pronunciations like flambard and flammard. However, the spelling found in Dark Souls is more aligned with the French version of the weapon, which also tracks with the size of the weapon, as a German Flammenschwert were generally the same length and size of a Zweihander, while the French flame blade swords could be of any length, with the most famous reference to a weapon with the name being to Durandal, the legendary sword of Charlemagne's paladin Roland. So we'll go with the French pronunciation of flamberge. Talk about a long walk for a short drink of water, but quickly Googling the pronunciation for a bit took me on more of a journey than I expected. And now, we've all learned something. Want to know what else I learned? That I hate this stupid Hydra. You know, I had to do this ladder climb back in the Claw Run too, and it went extremely well back then. Got it on my first try. Little did I know then that Dark Souls was playing the long con, fooling me into a false sense of security every time I've tried to make this climb sense. After a straight hour of deaths here, we finally make it up because I honestly don't know. Not sure what I did different, because clearly my other attempts to quit out and reset the Hydra's aggro, or whatever else I tried, had nothing to do with me actually making it up here. However, now that we're here, we can finally talk to Elvina, join the PvP group while offline, yeah, fat lot of good your ring is gonna do here, and prepare to meet Shiva down in Blighttown. This could all be done so much easier if we could get our hands on 20k souls right off the bat. But even then, the best passive soul farm available right now is back to the Hydra. So, I won't be doing that right now. For clarity, getting to the Dragon Bridge passive farm is maybe technically possible, but not practical while I'm not allowed to attack. Because at the moment, since I don't have the weapons available to the build, I'm not allowed to simply use my fist. This will be important soon when it comes to the non-empty fist in my left hand. For now, I need to get jump scared by Snek here, because I'd been running around looking at the back of her head for so long that I completely forgot what her face looked like, especially in the beef jerky form. But we're heading down so that we can finally talk to Shiva in Blighttown and buy up the flamberge, and with my consumable souls I've been picking up on the way, I've got enough to buy the weapon and barely be able to actually use it. We'll also be sticking around minimum stats for a while here, since we need to spend most of our remaining souls getting ready to pick up the other tool in this build. But we'll get there soon. For now, we've got a weapon we can use to kill the Taurus demon. Turns out to be a little tougher than I'm used to. Not because of the damage or the moveset, the Flamberge is doing some pretty decent work, and has a relatively fast R2, at least for a greatsword. Hell, the R1 is only a step slower than a longsword. So no complaints on the sword at this point. What I will complain about is the fact that my armor is a Hollow Warrior loincloth, and not only do I not have a shield, I also can't even two-hand the Flamberge in order to block with it. It's a small thing, but you'd be surprised how much a lack of parry or the buffer of shielding at least one attack can throw the whole game out of whack. That being said, this did mean that I was paying more attention to my positioning than I've really had to for a lot of other build options. Like, as a dodgy boy at heart, I know that positioning is important, always making sure that my dodges are placing me outside of the enemy's hitbox. But being stuck without the normal backup of guarding in case my dodge doesn't come out quite on time meant that I needed to be a bit more efficient with baiting attacks and rushing in for a quick punish. No tanking for me here. Still, I get into the rhythm with the Tauros Demon and eventually get the kill. But I gotta say that this is more of a struggle than I've had against this guy in years. I do, however, manage to get a bleed on him. Don't expect a lot of those. While this has the same bleed buildup as a bandit knife, it is quite a bit slower, and that buildup shrinks way too fast for most enemies, especially when I can't turtle up in armor and be aggressive. In Undead Parish, we find a lot of examples of how interesting the flamberge can be. This is because of the wonky wind-up of the R2, followed by the actual hitbox part of the attack, which whips out at lightning speed. Once I get the rhythm for this R2 down, I can bait most enemies into attacking me, then slice them up before they can hit me. Extremely useful against the shield-wielding undead soldiers. Not quite as good against the boar, though. But we can at least shove the curly-Q blade right up his ass and return to baiting and punishing on the hollows on the way to the gargoyles. Which also means it's time for our second boss. Very vanilla pathing here, especially considering that we've got the Master Key. In that case, we're technically fighting gargoyles at their most difficult. However, we've also gone and upgraded our flamberge to +5, so yeah, not exactly the most difficult. We even get the tail cut on the first gargoyle. It certainly helps that I've now been running around with our primary weapon for a while, and its unique moveset has started to engrave itself into my mind. The key is getting your internal metronome to count out that added beat from the R2's little feint. That, and once again, measuring out the safe distance before rushing forward. Honestly, fighting with this weapon and limited defenses makes a lot of these encounters much less berserk and a lot more HEMA. Which is to say, a little less visual flair, but slightly more realistic. I mean, as long as you ignore the undead men, the giant monsters, and my Sneky woman. Alright, with the gargoyles gone, however, we can move on to our next task at hand. Killing the Capra demon. Seriously, this run is so vanilla it'll wind up in a wedding cake. But not like a Kardashian kind of thing. Like a work associate's destination wedding, but the destination is like the closest beach to the office, even if that's only a lake and not the ocean. Sorry, landlocked states. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right, Capra demon. Well, to prepare for the fight, I went ahead and did the Dragon Bridge passive farm until I could reach the faith requirement to use Lightning Spear. And before anyone questions why I would pick Thief for a faith build, like a handful of comments I got of people accusing me of not knowing Dark Souls enough to make videos on the game, the Thief has the second highest faith stat of all 10 classes, making it a pretty solid choice for a faith build. It likewise has the second highest intelligence stat, making it a pretty decent starting point for any kind of magic build. White, black, or red. I also farmed the proper legs to complete the Snake Lady look, and it was not worth the effort, stat-wise, but 90% of the game is drip, and that's well worth it. We can't farm up the sunlight medals right now to get the Great Lightning Spear, so put a pin in that, but for now, we get what is probably the most powerful attack spell in the entire game. Between the Flamberge's goated moveset and this, are we sure this is a challenge run anymore? Yes, but we'll get there. The point right now is that regular Lightning Spear absolutely melts the Capra demon. And the Flamberge makes quick work of his dogs, too. It gets a bit touch and go there. Again, I've got basically no defense here. A Hollow Soldier waistcloth doesn't exactly offer a lot in the way of poise or damage negation. Still, we only need to survive one hit from the dogs in order to get in position up the stairs. Then it's a simple matter of fencing down the Capra demon himself once the dogs are gone. Fortunately, he keeps trying these power attacks with their long windups and huge recovery frames, leaving himself open for all of my fancy flipping feints as I slash him to pieces. Next up is to head to the depths because we obviously want to grab the large ember and level up our Flamberge to +10. On the way, we take out the butcher, which goes surprisingly well without the ability to parry. What doesn't go well is trying to get the plunging attack on the giant rat. I'll be honest, I don't remember the last time I fought the giant rat for real, and I'm surely not well versed against him. I'm also not Shirley. That joke works better in the text of my script because of the spelling. Instead, I'm simply a hack stealing jokes from one of the best comedies ever written. At least I didn't forget the punchline this time, unlike the stupid Zen bullshit from the Overencumbered run. Well, we get our revenge, take out the channeler that buffs the Gaping Dragon, and continue on that traditional path. Seriously, this run is becoming so vanilla that Snek is gonna wind up in the most uncomfortably violent NTR fan art on Twitter. This is not a call to action. This is a tail cut. That's all the satisfaction a man could ever need. So yeah, the Gaping Dragon isn't exactly the toughest fight here. This is mostly thanks to the range I've got in the form of the Lightning Spear. But as long as you can avoid the wonky hitbox on the grab, nothing in the Gaping Dragon's moveset is really all that dangerous, especially once the tail is taken care of. With him down, we need to head to Blighttown, which I enter from the rear since I don't need anything on the regular path. And there we go, we've finally broken that vanilla streak. We've also broken the fun progression streak as we spend a decent amount of time farming the slugs near the Great Hollow. We also get the Chloranthy Ring and a handful of Titanite chunks from within the Great Hollow in order to stem off some of our future grinding. Back in Blighttown, however, we kill a handful of slugs until we have enough large Titanite shards in order to buff the Flamberge to Raw +5. At the moment, this will be the better upgrade path, considering that we'll be staying at the base stats for wielding the weapon until our health and stamina are able to catch up with the levels we've needed to dump into everything else. Likewise, we're also looking for some green Titanite chunks, although the reasoning there is much less interesting. Once the grind is done, however, we can finally jump into fighting Quelaag. Depending on how I might be leaning on the build, this could potentially be an issue. I'm sure that getting through Quelaag with only the lightning spears might be a pretty tough wall, since the 10 casts don't really have the damage to take her out, and extra casts are currently locked behind her and some other progression. However, with the raw +5 Flamberge to balance out the build, Quelaag's massive health bar is less of a problem than my own greed and ability to get out of the way before the explosion can blast me to pieces. Given that I've got no way of guarding against these attacks, it's once again my lack of defenses that are really causing problems for me, rather than the balance of my offensive capabilities. In that case, Quelaag goes down, not quickly, but she does go down and we ring the second bell. While we're here, we also take out Ceaseless Discharge. Mostly because I'm looking to eventually get myself a hold of that Great Lightning Spear by farming the Sunlight Maggots in the Demon Ruins. However, we won't be able to get there until we've placed the Lordvessel. But we do still manage to use our current spears to flex on Ceaseless Discharge and send him over the edge. For now, the grinding will have to wait, and we can instead head home to Sen's Fortress. Hello, fellow Sneks! How's it going? Not well, it would seem. And here I thought this would be a nice little homecoming. But no. Looks like they still haven't forgiven me for leaving home in the first place. Well, if that's how it's going to be, then I guess I've got no choice but to carve my way through here. We're going Highlander style. The strongest must survive. There can only be one! Wait, that's not a Snek? Well, we'll kill it regardless. We've reached the miracle-only section of the run, as Lightning Spear absolutely carries the fight. No need to drop Iron Golem off the edge with this one, as we've got the damage to tear him apart already. Well, Sen's Fortress went quickly, maybe we'll be equally as lucky with Anorlando. As far as the rafters and the gargoyles goes, the build is pretty solid, and luck is certainly on my side. However, arriving to the Anorlando archers, we hit a wall for specifically me. Once again, I'm used to parrying most enemies in DS1, and that includes the Silver Knights that lead into the castle proper of Anorlando. However, without the ability to parry, well, yeah, it doesn't go all too well. And I'm aware that there is a consistent and quick way to get the right Silver Knight to walk off the ledge, but I'm not really practiced at that strategy. Likewise, a combination of a lack of defense from the Flamberge and the charge time on the Lightning Spears makes this a tough fight. So it takes a handful of attempts for Snek to finally make it to the bonfire. With that finished, it's only uphill from here, right? Oh, right. These two. Yeah, O and S are a bit of a problem here. Starting with the fact that Ornstein is resistant to the Lightning Spears, which also cuts down a lot of my damage potential, if I even had the time to actually cast the spell, which I don't. Smo will also get the resistance in phase 2 if I want to go for the easier second phase with Super Smo, So even then, the lightning spears really won't be a big part of this fight. Instead, the trick here is patience. Wait for proper openings, don't greed, and keep an eye on what Smo is doing off camera while I'm wailing on Ornstein. Although wailing is a bit of a misnomer, considering that we only really get to dish out one attack at a time. I mean, if we can get 3 hits off in a row, then we can stagger Ornstein. But that's a big if. Because by the second attack, he's either going to retaliate, or Smo is going to show up with that stupid hammer snow shoveling bullshit. So, thanks to some nice patience, we get to Smo, and it's all downhill from here. And by all, I of course mean all of my pride. Because yeah, I died to the easy part of the fight. Awesome! Super loving not having the ability to block at all, forcing me to play smart and patient, when all I want to do is be stupid and aggressive. Anyway, we get back to phase 2, actually run out of the range of the butt slam, and bring Smo down. We even get the first bleed me since fighting the Taurus demon. Leave it to ONS to be the biggest struggle in the run so far, and likely the biggest one until I start heading into the DLC. Case in point, after picking up the Lordvessel, I head out and kill Moonlight Butterfly. Not fight, kill. Outright. Lightning Spear, once again, carries the fight. If it wasn't for an initial whiff, I'd have gotten through him before he even landed. Granted, this is a very early game optional boss with what is basically an endgame build, so was it ever a surprise that I was going to smash him apart? Speaking of little surprise of bashing a boss to pieces, how about Pinwheel? Well, we'll get there actually. First, we need to go on a few detours. First is to become one with the Snek by allowing Frampt to eat us, which allows us to then place the Lordvessel and open some of the golden fog walls, specifically the one in the demon ruins that leads to where the sunlight maggots hang out. Let's get through this real quick because it takes a while. Instead, we'll speed ahead to the part where I turn the metals in for the Great Lightning Spear, which, did you know that Solaire shows up here at the Sunlight Altar after finishing up Anor Londo? Because I've never really been back here after that point. So I had no idea. Although, I gotta say, it really adds a level of gravitas to getting Great Lightning Spear, because I've got Sunbro here, guiding me into worship as a warrior of sunlight. Super glad I didn't kill him. I'll have to make sure not to let him go crazy later. Anyway, back in the catacombs, I've got a +5 Divine Flamberge to permanently kill the skeletons, and 2 levels of Lightning Spear to kill the pyromancers at a distance and defeat the entire purpose of cutting my weapon's damage in half by sending it halfway up the divine path. Also, is permanently killing skeletons even that important? No, it isn't. Regardless, we're finally back to Pinwheel, and I kill him in seconds. I mean, it's Pinwheel. What's he gonna do, die on me? Well, he does die, so yeah. Now that we've finished off Pinwheel, we can make it a bit deeper into the Tomb of the Giants, and by that I mean I get to the bonfire before immediately warping out of here. We've got one more boss before we start setting up our endgame. Time to kill Sif. Or get killed by her. Well, damn. Sif gets a win for once. Bravo! Very good dog. Please, accept this boop on the snoot as congratulations and have a nice sleep. Because she's sleeping. And nothing else. Now, for that setup, first we head down into New Londo ruins for the very large ember and some extra Titanite chunks. No need to grind since we found a handful in Great Hollow this time. Then we're back to the Undead Asylum, where we kill the Stray Demon for the Titanite slab and pick up the Peculiar Doll, since we're doing all bosses today. Hence all of the vanilla progression from earlier. After that, we take our now +15 Flamberge into Duke's Archives and make our progression through the scripted death to Seath, and all the way to the Warpable Bonfire. Then it's time to grab one final upgrade to our damage. Not exactly sure how true to the Snek roleplay it is, but it will be a huge part of getting us past one of the bosses coming up, and will speed us along for some of the others. We're fighting Gwyndolin, whose boss arena we can enter after having lightning speared the Guinevere illusion up in the throne room. Crazy enough, we actually get another death on Gwyndolin. As is often the case, this is because I was trying to flex. This time with the Great Lightning Spear. Yeah, it turns out that the charge time on the Great Lightning Spear makes it pretty much unusable on Gwyndolin. Or at least the window to use it is way too thin for me to sit still and throw at my heart's content. Instead, I lean on the Flamberge and we cut Gwyndolin down with a handful of those nice flourishing R2s. Our reward for hunting down Gwendolyn, who was kinda vibing down here? Yeah, not exactly sure why I bothered with this, but they're on the checklist, so... Anyway, we get Sunlight Blade for beating Gwendolyn. Technically not the strongest buff we could have gotten for our Faith build, as hitting max rank in the Darkmoon Covenant and wielding Darkmoon Blade could have gotten us a bigger bang for our buck. However, if we're going all bosses, then we'd lose that spell at some point. Also, Sunlight Blade at least looks a little more like lightning than Darkmoon Blade does, and that fits a bit better with the Snek roleplay. Basically, I'm taking that left-handed lightning throw and attaching it to my weapon. I mean, the Snake Ladies can't do that normally, but I also can't hold 3 flamberges plus the talisman for throwing lightning, so we take the buff and call it even. Now, attentive viewers might also notice that we've got access to 3 Lord Souls, and we're going to hit them pretty much back to back, starting with Nito. This is a bit of a touch-and-go fight, to be honest. Nito almost kills me outright with his grab attack, something that I haven't actually been caught by in years. Likewise, I normally block the AoE miasma in order to stay a bit closer to him and keep from having to run towards the back of the arena, where I'll aggro the giant skeletons. So not having a shield or even being able to two-hand my weapon turns out to add a little extra challenge to this fight as well. I should note that when I comment on not being able to block, the reduced damage isn't even really the biggest part of the equation here, especially while I'm stuck without much armor or poise. The real issue is that even with low poise or stamina, blocking an attack has a much lower recovery time than getting hit outright. This means that even if a blocked attack winds up breaking through all of my stamina, I'll still be able to react to most follow-up attacks with either another desperate block or hopefully a dodge before taking full damage. Without that to fall back on here, getting hit at all will usually either stagger me enough to get me caught in a follow-up or flatten me entirely and leave me at the mercy of the enemy. The result is that even the smallest mistakes can have devastating consequences in a lot of these late-game fights, and face-tanking even the simplest attack really isn't an option in the same way that it would be with a shield or better armor. Still, in the case of Nito, I managed to dodge well enough to not get completely crushed by him, even if I do finish the fight with no Estus remaining, and am in full panic mode that he might miasma me again and force me into a more dangerous part of the arena. The various levels of Lightning Spear also do their intended job, and I snake out a first try win. Next up is Seath, who really doesn't stand a chance against any of my damage. This includes the enhanced damage from the Sunlight Blade, but also the Lightning Spears, which absolutely shred him to bits. I don't manage a tail cut, but I still take Seath out with much less worry than Nito, and we move very quickly on to the next Lord Soul. Time for the 4 Kings, and I'll be honest, I was pretty doubtful about this one. For one, being stuck in the Hollow Soldier Waistcloth means that I can't lean on high poise, high damage resistance armor like Havel's or the Stone Guardian armor. That being said, once I get in close to the 4 Kings, I do get to take advantage of one specific quirk of the fight. Turns out getting hit by the hilt of their weapon does significantly less damage than taking a stab or slash directly from the jagged blade itself. So as long as I can keep close enough, they really can't hope to deal enough damage to burn me down faster than I can heal back up to full. Combine that with some actual dodging, and each individual king doesn't really become a problem. They do kill me once, as one of those pesky projectiles comes looping back on me from behind. However, with a little better RNG and a touch of patience, we make it through on our second attempt. That's our Lord Soul boss rush down. Now we've got a bit more distance to cover before we can make it to the last of the 4 and get started on finishing off this playthrough. This starts by heading back to the Demon Ruins, where we run up against the Demon Fire Sage. Now, I skipped over the Stray Demon before because it was little more than a bump in the road, and I figured I'd basically be describing it here. Granted, old Fire Sage here decided to be a bit more of a pill than Stray, as this one decided to constantly spam the AoE. Like, he had no interest in butt slams or swinging that catalyst. It was giant red explosion after giant red explosion. And more than one of them absolutely caught me as I'm running around trying to not get killed. That being said, I've at least got enough health at this point to not have to worry too much, about 30 vitality in total, with my last few levels having gone into Dex and Faith in order to power up the Flamberge and Lightning Spirits respectively. So we make it through, one slow cut at a time between explosions, and could move on to take on the Centipede Demon. Now, the Centipede Demon is kind of an interesting fight with this build. It's been a while since I've done a build that had any kind of range, to be honest, and the lightning spears offer plenty of it. Interestingly, when I start wailing on the boss from a distance, punching holes into it with my Great Lightning, the Centipede Demon appears to notice and comes in for close combat a lot faster than he normally does. Usually the fight is a mess of waiting around for the boss to come out of the lava and actually fight me somewhere I can fight back, either right by the door or across the initial lava stream out on that little island. So I gotta say, it is quite refreshing to have him completely abandon his long-range jumping attacks in favor of getting up close and personal right off the bat. Unluckily for him, at this range, it doesn't take long for the flambears to finish the job that the lightning spears had started. And then there was one. Not sure what to say about Bed of Chaos that hasn't already been said. Since I can't equip a bow or throw firebombs, the cheese method is out of the question, but I do get to bring the run that gave me the idea to play as Snek in the first place full circle. Seeing as how it was against the Bed of Chaos in the Doomer run that I first realized how awesome the Flambears really is. And after having gone through most of the game with it at this point, it's a solid contender for a top tier weapon. Truly an outrageously good showing for this thing. And that's with the limiting factor of forcing myself to one-hand it and put a talisman in my offhand. I can only imagine how great of a pickup it would have been in a casual run. Oh, and the Bed of Chaos kills me a couple times. Some of my jumps are on point, some are not, and I get the kill after not too much struggle. At least not compared to some of my previous attempts at this boss. This only leaves one optional boss in the base game, which means it's time to head into the Painted World and take on Priscilla. I rush through most of the area, and my damage at this point makes me more than a match for the boss. My initial attack cuts off her tail, and the second one knocks her out of her invisibility. After that, it's a simple task of keeping close and cutting away until Priscilla goes down. Not much to say when she dies that fast. This build is proving to be incredibly powerful at this point. But it isn't exactly fast, so how's it going to do against the DLC? Well, to get there, we need to cover a few steps, like getting our revenge on the Hydra. Yeah. You enjoy the lightning, you multi-headed bastard? How do you like getting spammed with projectiles? You don't, do you? That's what I thought. Probably could have done that a bit earlier, but I wanted to flex on the Hydra harder than I've ever flexed on anything in any of these games. After the hell it put me through in the beginning, it was well worth the wait. Now we can rescue Dusk, pick up the broken pendant, and have the Handman take us into the distant past. So, Artorias of the Abyss. How's ol' Snek gonna stand up against Dark Souls' DLC? Also, show of hands, how many of you even remember that the DLC is named after Artorias? I feel like most Souls content simply calls it the DLC nowadays, which is weird since we don't do that for Shadow of the Erdtree or the Ringed City. Anyway, let's fight the Sanctuary Guardian. And when I say fight, I certainly don't mean kill. Gonna be honest, this was the end of my first play session for this recording, and I was really tired at this point. Considering I'm terrible at fighting Sanctuary Guardian normally, fighting him after having been up for like 36 hours straight, insomnia, right, was never going to go well. Coming back a few days later though, some actual sleep in me, and this fight goes much easier than my initial attempts had implied it would be. Once again, the trick here is patience. Most attacks don't really have enough of a recovery window to maximize on, but if RNG is good on the multi-hit combo, or if you can get around the wing attack without the wind launching you, there are plenty of opportunities to get the kill. Otherwise, avoid the lightning and lean on R1s over R2s most of the time here. That'll be coming up again soon, but for now, we kill the Guardian and make our way deeper into the DLC. As I walk through the forest for various reasons, one being that I haven't been using cheats for this whole playthrough, so why start now? But two being that even if I was cool with meme rolling to skip the forest, I can't, because I can't put on any extra armor or weapons to hit the required equip load. Still, it's a brisk walk through the forest, and I have to watch my favorite drip slip right out of my grasp. Because Snek. So, Artorias. How's that go? Surprisingly well, actually. I mean, not at first. At this point, I'm still leaning pretty heavily on the R2 because it's still very fun. However, the R1 is really the way to go against the Abyss Walker himself. In fact, 3 R1s is enough to keep him out of his buffing phase, which is a bit of a litmus test for the viability of pretty much any build. Like, I know we all consider the 4 Kings to be the major DPS check of the game, thanks to the timer on extra Kings showing up. But Artorias' buff phase might have those 4 beat out. Like, I can handle an extra king on the field for like 30 seconds, but buffed Artorias is brutally difficult, as is fighting the man without a shield or armor. Like, we can't parry him regardless, for sure, but without being able to poise through even the weakest attacks, he can quickly combo me into the ground if I'm not careful. It's not exactly a no-hit run, but it's pretty damn close, even with all of my extra flasks to lean on. Still, tough as Artorias might be, his abyss-addled form is nothing against the power of Snek. Who's next? Well, less who here and more what. Because we've got Ulasil Township next, and while I normally breeze over this part to get straight to Manus and Calamite, it's worth talking about the trip to both of them for a couple reasons. For one, since Snek can't cast light in any way, either by wearing a sunlight maggot or casting the spell, we can't get in to pick up the silver pendant that allows us to deflect dark magic. I even tried to jump in through the window, but the collision simply wouldn't allow it. Sucks to suck, I guess. Time to move on. The other thing I'd like to highlight is how easy it is to run past the Lumpy Hollow Man. I could have looked up his name, but I didn't want to. And the Bloated Sorcerers. No need for quitouts or anything, works first time, every time, minus the 3 deaths on average. Alright, we're through the tough parts, we free Sif, if I even bothered to capture for that part, and one cutscene later, it's time to kill Calamite. This is surprisingly simple. There's usually no point in defending against Calamite anyway, and he breaks through pretty much any poise already. So there isn't much different between this fight and any other. The real problem comes from trying to get the tail cut, which I'm aware there's a consistent method to get, but I haven't really practiced it at all. In this case, I go for a standard kill, and with 2 dragons and a hydra down, Snek is named Queen of the Reptiles. Now for the Handman, long-time viewers might remember that I'm terrible at this fight, even when I have the silver pendant, and without it, that being said, this is surprisingly less of a problem than Manus usually is. Like in total, I think this takes me about 3 tries to get him down, which is not normal for me. I think the Flambears might be goated, guys. No notes. Hate this man, love this weapon, let's get out of the DLC. With that, all we have left is Gwyn, who's always easy. Oh. Right. No parry. So I'll be honest, I'm still not very used to fighting Gwyn without a proper parry, and I don't know how I actually managed to get through this. Like, some runs are better than others. Sometimes I'm able to very clearly dodge all of his attacks and there's nothing wrong. Right up until he snags me once and I get stuck in a loop of trying to heal, get punished, repeat until I eventually die. I'm not entirely sure on Gwyn specifically, but this feels like dealing with the input reading from the Godskin duo. Yes, I know it's reading animation frames and not actually input reading. So if you were getting ready to leave that comment, then please touch grass. On top of that, what also keeps killing me is the saved inputs on my rolls after I get hit. Like, I try to roll, I fail and he hits me, then I roll anyway, even though it's been 15 years since the last time I was within the same time zone as the dodge button. And 1 hit turns into 2, which quickly turns into death. Eventually though, there is no trick to this. There's no special strategy of baiting any specific attack that does it. All that works is to lock in, prepare for a long road ahead, and try again, and again, and again, until Gwyn finally goes down. That was a terrible way to end an otherwise completely goated run. Although I will say that Gwyn was at least the toughest fight in the whole game, something that I've never had to say in a challenge run before. So congrats, Gwyn. You get 1. Me, on the other hand, I lead our lovely lady into becoming our Dark Queen in this everlasting age of the Snek. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon, link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge $5 or more get their names read out, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.
You leave me no choice,